So perfect. Yeah. So it looked like 60%. I don't know. I was just kind of look through all of them. I can't see the people who just has your name, so I couldn't see your thumbs, but it looked like a lot of you have been with me. So thank you, Juan. That thumb is just, you're killing it with that thumb. It's nice to see a lot of the familiar faces, but know that like some people are new to me and new to this NGSS probably. So let me just do a quick intro. I'm Paul Andersen. I was a science teacher, middle and high school for 20 years. So here in Montana. And then I've been doing this job with international schools for the last 8 years, trying to help them with NGSS. For me, what we're gonna do in our time today, this idea of mini lessons to teach these different dimensions of science is the one thing as I work with schools right now where the secondary science teachers are saying that's really helpful. Like I'm going to start doing mini lessons with my kids. We did some mini lessons last time we were together. Anybody in here has tried some mini lessons with their students on teaching the practices? Yeah, so like Thelma, Juan. Thelma, describe a little bit of what you were doing, Thelma, if you don't mind.
Well, I have been using your inquiry cycle. So I have been using the slides that you provide with some of the practices, and they have been very helpful to me because they have been helping my students with the graphic organizers, with the whole process, you know, thinking in cause and effect, applying the different practices, but also the cross-cutting concepts so that they apply really the cycle, right? Starting with the phenomenon and all the steps. I am just wondering when I'm going to publish the rest of the, I have the opportunity to ask you, I'm waiting for those. I have been
Already.
page like almost every day.
You keep reloading. Yeah.
Hopes that we are there.
Yeah.
It's always those way coming soon things, but I'm eager to see them show up soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Thelma. Yeah, so it has been, we did a bunch of ones around like systems, cause and effect and patterns. Then we started traveling. So I've been traveling a bunch, and I also had some family issues that like I just lost some time. And so we're kind of back to work now. So I'm gonna try Thelma some new ones tonight. Will be ones that you haven't seen before for sure. So we're gonna dig into scale, which and a lot of the work I found to be super important. And then I think Laura and I are gonna take some time off in February, and we're going to try to pump a bunch more out. So like Thelma, my two big goals in the work is working on assessments, but then also working on these mini lessons. So don't keep refreshing. It's going to be into 2022 until they get there. But yeah, and I love what you said of Thelma, just like giving them a graphic organizer or a way to think about it. I'm sure they appreciate it and teachers appreciate it as well. So if you're new to this, again, what we're going to try to dig into, let me frame mini lessons first. I'm going to show a few slides. And then if you've never been to one of my workshops, what we do is I'll do a little bit of learning with all of us together. Then we're going to throw you into breakout rooms and you're going to work in a group and do something similar. And then we'll come back and then we'll kind of I think this is something, this whole idea of teaching three-dimensionally is something you can't just talk about. You have to try it and do it. And for me, even like I have to think through these ideas with my wife and she gives me feedback. So long story short, let me get started. So I'm going to start with just sharing a couple of slides here. Let's try that one more time. Okay, does that show up, John? Are you seeing mini lessons 6 through 12? Does that show up on your screen? Perfect. So again, we always have this as a website, thewonderofscience.com. So everything that we do will eventually go there. We've set up a page for our work together today. So thewonderofscience.com/try. That has all the resources that we've done and we'll continue to work on. And so I don't know, Laura, if you don't mind, if you have a second putting that in the chat. We're going to do some breakout groups. And so all of the slides that we'll use will be in there. And I guess everything that I've got done is going to kind of go there. Let me just frame our thinking a little bit before we dig in and do a little bit of this mini lesson. To frame our thinking, I mean, I've been around science education for 30 years and my dad was a professor before that. So as we think about science, old school science, so like old school science, and some of you know exactly what this is, the piece of technology in the upper right. Some of you might not be familiar with that, but that's called an overhead projector. And man, that was a lot of my teaching early in my career. And so old school way of teaching, just teaching science, good practice of old school teaching was you teach the content through direct instruction. I remember making these big detailed like lectures and I would just unveil them on my overhead projector to say like, like just focus on this content and this content. So like we used to be really good at leading with that direct instruction and then a demo. So like a demo that comes in to describe what we're doing. So Bill Nye is pretty dated right now, even though Bill Nye is still used in a lot of classrooms. Like that whole idea of he's explaining the science and then here's a demo where he tells exactly what's going on in the demo. That's kind of an old school way of teaching science. The labs that we did also old school were cookbook labs. So it was a lab where you're doing this and then you do this and then you calculate percent error, or you mix this and then you Bunsen burner this, or like it's always been pretty cookbook in old school. And it worked really, really well. Like we could get kids understanding the content, but we didn't get them to a deep understanding of the science that we want them to have now, or to think more, more creatively and coming up with solutions to real authentic problems. And so this is new school. And so a lot of us are just kind of learning as we go. New school is you never lead with the content, you always lead with a phenomena. So I was in Pennsylvania, and this is a lesson I taught in a biology class just about a month ago. So we started with this. I was just out walking and I saw this deer, which is a crazy looking deer. Not to kill the wonder too much, but this is a albino deer. And so that's the phenomena. And so that sits at the center of the learning. And then the kids were asking questions, they were modeling, but the big thing we were having them do is really trying to use scale and make sense at the mechanism level of what's going on inside this deer. And so it wouldn't have worked if I didn't do a mini lesson on scale. And so mini lessons should be thought of as a way to teach these different skills that they can apply into the phenomena. And so kids don't know how to construct an argument, kids don't know how to think in cause and effect, kids don't know how to think in scale. And so we have to teach them how to do that. And so that's the focus of our time together right now, is we're going to dig into what does a mini lesson look like? And then we'll just kind of do some mini lessons together. As I've been digging through, the cross-cutting concept that I have been focused on a ton right now is scale, proportion, and quantity. It's actually number 2. So like when they put together the cross-cutting concepts, this is number 2, which always seemed weird to me. Why did they go systems and then they went to this? And I think I'll kind of get to why I think that's important. And then the second one is one of the most foundational things we want kids doing is analyzing data. Like how do they interpret data? How do they dig into complex data sets, and giving them the tools to do that. So tonight I'm going to start with a mini lesson on a cross-cutting concept, but then we're also going to have a mini lesson on the doing of science, or analyzing and interpreting science. So to start with, let's say we're doing the following phenomena. I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is a little HHMI video, but if you cut the leg off of a salamander, so if you remove the leg of a salamander, this is just showing you the parts of the leg. If you remove the salamander's leg, it will grow back. So this is a time lapse over 90 days. So as you watch it, like eventually the leg will come back. So this would be a really cool phenomena that I could have kids inquiring into, like, how does that work, or what's going on? We could ask questions, we could do some modeling, but they're really going to come up against this idea of there's a lot of things going on there that I can't see. I literally can't see. And so for me, what I would build is then a mini lesson. And this mini lesson now is going to be on scale. What do we do when we can't see what we're really trying to study? And so I'm going to do a quick mini lesson, and this is going to be on scale and digging into scale. So let's see, hopefully this shows up for you. Are you guys, let me see, is this showing up for you, John? Are you seeing this? Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up. Sorry, not everybody jumps up at the top of my Zoom. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a mini lesson on what are called scale models in the NGSS. This wouldn't be the first lesson they do. They first have to understand what scale is. Then there's a mini lesson that I'll do on quantity, but we're really starting with a middle school lesson, and this is going to be on building scale models. How do we develop a scale model? And that's what we're going to do a mini lesson on. If you've seen any other videos that I've done, I've always started every video with a system, like what's the system that we're going to investigate? But I'm going to introduce a new term to you as we dig into scale models, and that's called the target system. A target system is when you're trying to understand something, you focus on a specific target to dig more deeply into. So example, like when I hold these blocks together, you can see that the bottom one is connected to the top one. So you could say, man, my target system is really going to be like, how does that work? How are those two connected together? So a target system is being like explicit and specifically what we're going to study. So let me do an example of a scale model. I'll do this and show you my thinking as you're watching, teachers. Like, you're going to do this in a second. So you want to learn, just as I do it, how to develop a scale model of your own. So as I go through it, it's just straight up direct instruction. So the phenomena that I'm going to show you as a starting point is, how does this work? How can I write on here? And then how do I erase it with this? So we're going to just do a scale model of how does ink flow from this to this to this. Whenever I'm doing these mini lessons, I always try to start with something real concrete. And so our target system is going to be ink flow. What I'm really trying to show you is, on a dry erase board, where's the ink going and how is the ink moving? And so for us to dig into understanding that, we just can't see it. It's almost like magic. Like, how does this work? And then where does it go? We have a sense of what's going on, but it's too small. We can't really see what's going on at that microscopic level. And so what for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a scale model. And this scale model is going to be at the microscopic level. So we're going to do a microscopic scale model. What I put in here doesn't have to be microscopic. It could be at the time scale. We're going to do a scale model that looks at time, or looks at different amounts of energy, or it could be slowing things way down and looking at a scale model. But for right now, I'm going to do a microscopic scale model. So the first thing I have to do is see things that I can't normally see. If I'm going to develop a model of how this works, I could identify the important parts. There's a lot of things here that I can't see. And so what I'm going to use is a microscope. That's what you use in science when you can't see something. And so this is just it's not a great one, but it's just a USB microscope. So it's connected, and I'm going to switch my camera to that in just a second. And so what am I going to have to get a picture of? If I really want to understand how ink goes from here to the whiteboard to here, I have to view those different things. So I'm going to draw some of this like this. And now I'm going to switch my camera to these different view. So hopefully this works. So let's go here. Alrighty. Okay, so does that show up for you guys okay?
Yep, it looks great,
Right.
Paul.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so let's look at some of these. First of all, this is what my whiteboard looks like. So this is like what we're seeing on the whiteboard. You can see that it's pretty white, but there's some grains in there. So I see some pits in there. What do I notice as far as the whiteboard goes? I don't see any structures that I don't see with the naked eye. It looks the same at the microscopic level. It's just a whiteboard, so that's not too exciting. Let's look at the drawing, the actual ink. If we look at the ink, let's just get this. Maybe let me move it a little bit. So this is what whiteboard ink looks like. So I can see that it's just kind of sitting on the whiteboard, but it's also fragmenting apart. So it's breaking off in little, it's almost like little strings or little hairs that it's coming off on. And so the ink is not just like liquid, it almost chunks apart. So that might be something I want to include in my scale model as well. Now we're going to look at the underside of my dry erase marker. So on the underside of my dry erase marker, it looks like this. So I don't know if you're picking up on that. Can you see those fibers on the inside? I see some fibers, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, some fibers that are white and some fibers that are dark, that are super black. I couldn't see that before. So it's important that we have a scale model. What would be another thing that I would want to look at? Let's just look at the end of the dry erase marker. So let's see. I need to focus a little bit. This is really tricky. Let me try that again. There, we're getting close. Are you guys seeing that okay? I guess I've never really looked at the front of a dry erase marker, but you've seen those fibers on there as well? So I'm seeing fibers on there as well. So let me get back to my scale model. So for us to do a scale model, a lot of the time, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to change your sense of scale. So we're gonna have to change, like, at what level are we looking at it? So there are some things that showed up on the microscope that didn't show up to the naked eye. And so on my scale model, I'm just going to start listing some of those things. What would be an important part of my model? The ink would be an important part of my model. When you're modeling, you always just say, like, what are all the parts that I want to include in my model? And just get the parts out there first. What would be some other things? The pen fibers would be a part of my scale model. So the pen fibers are something that I didn't see at the macroscopic level, but I saw at the microscopic level. I also saw the eraser fibers. Didn't even know those were there, but I'm seeing it at the scale model. And what would be another thing that I have? Maybe the whiteboard itself. So I could say just the whiteboard. There didn't seem to be that much exciting there with the whiteboard. So if I were to start doing a model, a scale model of what I think is going on, this is just me showing you my thinking. I think the ink is in the pen fibers. So I think the ink is loaded into the fibers of the pen. I think that's why all of them were black when I looked at the pen fibers. I think from the pen fibers, then the ink goes to the whiteboard. And then I think when you erase it, it goes to the eraser fibers. And then eventually, I don't know where the ink goes. So what do I have here? Are you with me? This is showing the targeted system of how ink flows, but this is a microscopic scale model. Advice I would give you when you're having your kids models is quit having them draw pictures, real detailed pictures. When they're modeling, it's a waste of time. And they'll draw like forever. They'll draw all these pictures, just use words, because these words eventually become mathematical representations of what's going on, and we can get way, way deeper. So this is me doing a model lesson. What I'm doing is I am just showing you a mini lesson on how to develop a scale model. What did I have to use? I had to use some kind of technology. In this case, I used a microscope to do it. So what you're going to do, if you could find me in Zoom for a second, I'm going to show you where you're going to go. So you're about to go into a breakout group. You'll be thrown into a breakout group with probably like 4 or 5 people. The first thing you want to do is just kind of quickly introduce yourself. Like, what do I teach? Where am I? I think that's always a good place to start. You also want to remember what group are we in again? It'll always be in the Zoom window at the top. So you can see in Zoom, it'll just say like you're in breakout group 1. And so what we're going to use is this website. Let's see, it looks like Laura's put it in the chat. I'll just put it again in there in case you just didn't get it. So if I put it in again. So this is the website that we're going to use. You're going to go into a breakout group. If it's not loading for you, you can always just kind of like refresh it. But you're going to be in a group and you're going to kind of decide to show our thinking in a scale model. So let's say I end up in group 2. So I'm in group 2 in Zoom. You can click, you can see here we're under secondary 612. You can click on the Google Slides for that. It's going to take a second to load, but what it's going to show is it's going to show you the 2 big bends that we're going to do. The first one is how to build scale models. And so let's say I'm in group 1 or group 2. These are all clickable. So you could just click on group 1 and it'll bring you to the slide that you're going to work on. It takes a second to kind of load it. So on this one, the first one I've got is me trying to clean up a water spill with money. So I'm just trying to clean it up with money, which doesn't work that well. And then I clean it up with a paper towel. So there's going to be a phenomena. You're going to see what it looks like at the macroscopic level, but then there's microscopic views as well. If you can't see it in enough detail, then you could look on the next page and it's going to show you what do these things look like at the microscopic and the macroscopic as well. It works best in the breakout groups if you just have one person share their screen and then you just kind of throw your thinking to them. And it's usually the person who's the best on Google Slides with the best kind of connection. But the idea is as a group, let's just do what what we saw Paul do with a different phenomena. Let me give you quick advice before you go to the breakouts. Step 1, like identify what are the big components in the model. And we can drag those out. There's components on the left side. So drag the components out first and then start connecting those together with the relationships. That's all a model is. It's just what are the components? How are they related? What's adding to this model is we're doing it at the microscopic scale. So it's a scale model. You'll have, I think, around 10 minutes, Laura. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds great.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll be in to just say hello, but good luck.
Hey, Paul.
Yep.
We are about 10 minutes later than we were with the earlier group.
I know.
Just so you know.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I'll just populate all this stuff to try to speed it up a little bit.
Hi, Natalie. And Marie, did you get kicked out of your room?
Yeah, I did. Hi.
I'm going to move you to room 2, and then I'm going to move you back to room 3, just because I can't control, because you didn't really
I was in room 1.
Okay, let me try moving you back to 1. Hold on a second.
Okay, thank you.
And Natalie, are you just joining us, or were you in a room and kind of got lost in the transition?
Sorry. No, I've been having all kinds of problems logging in. I've been trying to log in for the last hour.
Let me try putting you in a breakout group. We're just doing some breakout work on some Google Slides, okay? See if you can make it there. I'm going to just put you into room 3, okay?
Okay.
Sorry about that, Natalie.
All right.
Hey, Laura, how many breakouts do we have?
We only have 12.
Okay, all right.
And it's
they've
still
got 6
recording.
minutes.
It's recording and it follows you as the host. It doesn't
Okay.
go on and off.
Okay. Let's see what happens when I go.
I think we lost Natalie again, Paul.
Hey there.
Hi. Sorry
I'm
about
back.
this.
It's okay.
Should we try again?
Yeah, let's try. I mean, I just got kicked out. I don't know. It didn't make it over. I didn't make it over.
All right, well, let's try again. Here we go. Hey, Paul, it looks like room 9 all just joined us back here.
All right, group 9, did you guys finish? Are you guys good, or did you all get booted?
We're fine, we're here.
Okay, awesome. Welcome back. How's it going, Pablo? Good? Nice. I'll just ask you questions when you're eating. Yeah, so we have like another minute. I think groups are going to be working for another minute or so, I think.
Actually, can I use that minute for a question very quick?
Please, of course, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Fire
so,
away.
because I've seen your mini lessons, I'm a fan of them. I've tried to apply them, but I struggle a little bit in terms of how do I mix this with like, or how do I do a progression of this? That's just it, like from 6 to 12 grade.
Yeah, I think the one thing I've found, Pablo, is just like, let's say you're going to do something on like this. So we wanted kids to draw a microscopic scale model, but they don't know like what scale even is or what a model is. So it's like you almost have to like take them back to the kindergarten lessons. That's what I found. So like they literally, I've been in biology. I know I was in CMG and we were in a biology class where the teacher said like, they don't know what cause and effect is. Like if you, I can't remember, Karen was saying like, if you came in and there's just somebody laying on the floor, they wouldn't be able to identify what's the effect and what's the cause. So never feel guilty about taking it back to kindergarten level. I guess that would be my advice. That's what I've had to do. And then just kind of start to progress that way. I think you were kind of thinking about that as well.
Perfect, thank you. I actually thought about that, but I wasn't sure if that was like the right way.
You have to, yeah. Like it's one of those, it's almost like, imagine I'm trying to teach my kids long division, but they like never learned how to add. You can't just keep plowing ahead. They're just, they're missing a core piece. And so you're gonna have to go back to kind of do that. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Yeah, absolutely. So I know there's a lot of stuff, like there's connectivity issues. We gave you this huge Google slide with a bunch of animated GIFs and you're trying to work with people you just met. So there's a lot of constraints in your way, but I thought you did really, really good. I think the key thing I saw in your models is everybody was pretty good at like, these are the parts that we want to show, but getting to microscopic parts was the harder part. Like, how do we identify what are the parts within the parts? And then how do all those parts connect together? If you're just getting started on this mini lessons piece, the way Laura and I are doing it is we'll put videos out. Thelma had talked about those a little bit before, but we'll also put some Google slides and we'll put answer keys as well, so that you can kind of look at least my thinking, and those will just kind of grow hopefully over the next few months at least. That's kind of my goal. And scale is one of the ones that we're going to start to add. It's really hard, almost, we had said this with Pablo as well. It's hard for you to jump in on scale models where you haven't had lesson 1, which is on scale. What is scale? Or what a model is. So all of these things we're going to have to kind of teach. Let's go to another one though. So we're going to dig in again, and we're going to try to do a practice this time. So what we were doing right then is we were doing a mini lesson on how to think about a material, so how to think about target systems, and then looking at different scales. Probably the most used mini lesson that I've been doing recently was on claim evidence reasoning, how to get kids constructing an argument with CER. But I did that at our last training. And so we're going to dig into another one that I think is important, but I think like never feel guilty about digging into those. So let me share my screen and we're going to dig into one, which is how do we get kids looking at complex data sets? How do we get them making sense of data? So I'm going to start by sharing this for a second. Pablo, does that show up for you? Are you seeing this organized relationships in the blocks? Does that show up okay? Maybe. Laura, does this show up?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Awesome, perfect. Okay, so as I just mentioned a second ago, like it's really, if you're getting kids to do argumentation, this is not where we're going right now, but if you really want them to understand claim evidence reasoning and what a question is, like a mini lesson is the best way to do it, and use a concrete representation. We're going to move towards a different one. And this is what we're doing is we're really looking at data sets. And so this is how do we analyze data sets, and how do we look at data sets and make sense of data? As we dig into the data sets, the key thing is that like a first lesson would be, what is data? You know what I mean? Like a lot of the kids don't know that. Like, what is data? and how do I collect data? But we're going to jump ahead to a little bit more complex one, and that is data sets. As you look in the NGSS, they're pretty straightforward about what are the steps of looking at data sets. First, you identify what are the data sets we're going to investigate. You then organize the data, you identify the relationships, and then you interpret the data. So it's DORI. Or I think it's from Finding Nemo. Wasn't the name of the fish Dory, DORI? So like that's a good acronym for like how we start to do this. Just think about Dory. Maybe that's not helpful, but think about Dory to kind of make sense of a data set when you're given a data set. So we're going to put this over to the side because you want to identify what the data set is. Just like before we had a target system, for this one we're going to identify what the data set is. Then the steps that you do is you simply organize the data, you identify the relationships, and then you interpret the data. So what does that mean? Let's start with a real simple one. Let's say I have these 3 blocks like this, or maybe it's these 3 blocks that look like this, or it's maybe these 3 blocks that looks like that. The first thing you want to do when you're given data is you want to organize the data. You want to put it in an order that makes sense to you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the wooden block quantities. What do we notice in wooden blocks? And I'm trying to keep this as concrete as we can. So this is going to be our data sets that we're going to look at, just some quantities in wooden blocks. If you're really getting kids to gather evidence, you could have them measure some of these things, but I kind of did it for you. I would want students to organize it in a way that makes sense to them. So like what makes sense? It makes most sense to look at this block, then that block. I'm putting it in order. So that's the first thing that I would do. And then we have to get some quantities. So we have to get some numbers that are going to allow us to tell us a little bit more about the cubes. This is what I would give kids. Just give them a simple data set like this. So what I did was I named the cubes 1, 2, 3. I then just recorded the height, the mass, and then the surface area of the cubes. So that's what we're going to start with. So this is going to be the quantities that I'm talking about. We're looking at the data sets themselves. So the first thing you do, once we're given a data set like this, let me get these out of the way, is we're going to identify what is the data that we're really looking at. And so what is the data that I have? We have data on the height of the cubes. So that would be the first thing. How tall are they? We have data on the surface area of the cubes, and then we have data on the mass of the cubes. And so I'm going to organize the data first. I say what is in my data sets, and then the next thing I do is I just try to rough out what does it look like? What does the graph look like? And so if we look at the graph of height, you can see it goes from 1 to 1.5 to 2.0. So I want to organize the height. And so what does that look like? I would just have the kids rough it out. Don't graph it because that's going to take forever, but I would want that relationship to look like that. So it's a linear relationship. What's happening? It's increasing in equal amount over time. If I look at the mass, let's take a look at the mass. It goes from 10 to 37 to 81. So like, what does that look like? It's not increasing at a constant rate. What would that look like? It would look like that. If we look at the mass, what's happening with the mass, then I just look like that. So like in the organized phase, what do you do during the organized phase? You organize what data sets am I looking at? And then you just say like, what am I noticing in the data? And giving them some options when they're getting started. Is it linear? Like what kind of a curve is that going to be? And maybe giving them choices that they could do. But that's step 1, just organize. For some kids, you know, like that could be a whole quarter, getting them to graph appropriately. But again, that's not what this is really about. It's about how do we identify the relationships. Next is relationships. So as we look across, what are the relationships that I notice? Let's start with height. What is a relationship that I notice? The height relationship I notice is that it's linear. So that's an example of a relationship. It's a linear relationship. What's another example of a relationship? I could say is that it has a mean of 1.5. So like another relationship in the NGSS is us poring over the data and saying it's 1, it's 1.5, and it's 2. So the mean could be an example of something. I could say this next one, surface area, is a nonlinear relationship. When it comes to NGSS, all we're doing is just identifying the relationship as linear or nonlinear relationship. What would be another way to dig into the evidence? In other words, we're going just horizontally. Let's just look at the data for a second. Let's look at surface area. So surface area goes from 6 to 13 to 24. So we could say as the height increases, that would be another relationship. As the height increases, the surface area, as we double the height, the surface area quadruples. In other words, if I look at the height from 1 to 2, it's doubling, but the surface area is quadrupling. So what's another relationship we could say? So that height, as height goes up, we could say surface area quadruples. So that would be another relationship. All I'm doing in the relationship phase is I'm just looking and analyzing the data more carefully. What's in here in the NGSS when you get to high school, it's on statistical analysis. There's a bunch of stuff in the relationships phase, but it's just better understanding the evidence itself. And then the last phase is interpret. So like, how do I interpret all of this? I don't know. I'm sure you're thinking this in your head. An interpretation could be, this has to do with dimensions. So a lot of this has to do with 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, and 3 dimensions. So things like height are 1-dimensional, surface area is 2-dimensional, and mass is 3-dimensional. So that would be me interpreting the data. Like, how does this all data look like together? So this is not like the one perfect way to do every data set, but I think you want kids to start thinking of it this way. How do we organize the data? What relationships do we see in the data? And then finally, how do we interpret the data? And don't go here until you've organized the data. And don't try to interpret it until we've done the relationships. So just like we've had to learn with argumentation that it's always claim evidence reasoning, we have to do the same thing when it comes to looking at data sets. Because how are students going to be assessed on this? They're going to be assessed on, did you in your assessment organize the data? Did you identify all the relationships in the data? And then did you interpret the data? And so we're going to push you back into the breakouts. I know we're short on time, so it'll be a little bit shorter. Don't feel on this one like you have to get your slides all organized. It might be better if you just talk about the data, get on a slide that has the big data, but then say, what data are we seeing? What are the relationships that we have? And then we interpret that. I think the ones that we gave you as samples are like, what's in oatmeal when you're making oatmeal? Like, how much do you put in each serving size? And then you could look at a more complex one. So if you could, Laura, maybe I'm thinking, what are you thinking? 7 minutes, 8 minutes, something like that.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Good luck.
You got 10 minutes until your Q&A workshop.
Okay, thanks.
That's what my watch just told me.
Do we launch that one, Laura, or not?
We do. Hi, Elizabeth.
Okay.
Oh, there she goes. I think, yeah.
Laura just closed that up. Welcome back. It'll take a second for everybody to come back. For me, if it'd be fun to like just share out for the whole group with each other. I just joined a de facto group and we were into the oats pretty deep. We were into like serving size of the oats. I found like in our group, we didn't have time to get to the graphic organizer of how we show the thinking, but just using that metric of how do we organize it? What are the relationships that we see? And then how do we interpret it? It got us pretty deep into it. I think in our group, we were thinking about like the measuring spoon being quantized, where it's like you only have this size that maybe relates to the serving size. But then one person in my group, Kristen, was really good at saying like, well, watch what happens as this doubles, what happens to this? Or I think it really is teaching kids how to dig into the data set before we get confused with the science. That would be my biggest takeaway from the whole mini lessons. If you throw a new phenomena and a complex data set and patterns at kids, it's just overwhelming. So like if we're about to go into maybe looking at data sets on energy, a mini lesson using oats might be the perfect thing to do kind of before we dig into that. As we kind of, I think I've got like 1 minute left. I think the key thing as we go is like, we're getting better and better at kind of understanding these protocols, and I'll continue to share that on the Wonder of Science. Are there any questions that you have in the minute left? You can always throw it in the chat if you've got it, or thoughts. I think I have to probably close this one, but if you've got a burning question about oats, I'd love to hear it.
Were there intentional typos in there to throw us for a loop?
I don't know where the type, I'm sure it was just like Laura and I we've been putting this together up to the last minute. So it's totally mistakes. Thanks for that. Yeah. It is like, for me, getting deep into these standards and figuring out how you do mini lessons, they just don't really exist out there. And I think it's a real powerful thing. So thanks for being a part of that. Tomorrow, what we're going to do is look back on how do we assess the work that we did today. So I'm going to use some of the student work that we did today to see like how close this aligned in the practices and cross-cutting concepts. And Jose, yeah, or Joseph, was it like, yeah, we can also assess the assessment today as well. Awesome. Hey, I know we have a whole dedicated question and answer piece. I think I have to close this and then I'm going to open up the other one because other people are going to come in. But I look forward to your questions if you got them. If not, thank you, Juan. My oatmeal will taste differently tomorrow. That's awesome. Yeah, cheers.